Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Diz, a show that gives you everything you need to know to help make your Disney vacation as magical as can be in just about 20 minutes. I'm your host, Jeff Coviello. With me each week is Disney Master Sandy from Easy Diz by Instant Impressions Travel Services. Sandy, how are you this week?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. I am, the word I guess is not excited, but I'm thrilled, to be honest with you, to be able to do this show this evening with you because we're talking about, we're honoring a man that, in my estimation, really is only second to Walt himself as far as having the impact on how I've ingested the Disney intellectual property in my life. And of course, we're talking about Richard Sherman, who most recently passed away, and we thought it was the right thing to do to dedicate a show to his memory.
And you and I had talked about it. I mean, sadly, though it's clearly a part of life, we've lost a couple of Imagineers, a couple of very famous Disney people. Angela Lansbury is one that comes to my mind. She was the voice of Mrs. Potts.
Yep.
And, you know, in 3 years of doing the show, almost 4, it's bound to happen. But as essential as those were all to Disney, as you said, none of them really go back as far as Richard and his brother Robert. And Richard really continued to have that Disney legacy for so long. And there's just so many things that I think people don't even know either who Richard Sherman is or how much they impact every one of their Disney vacations. So as you said, it is our honor to pay tribute talking about the life and the wonderful magnitude of how Richard impacted us.
And you know, truth be told, as people know from listening to the show, you and I are both lovers of music, lovers of performance. Obviously, that's how we segue into Disney, and it's how we really have found ourselves tied to this wonderfully talented man, wonderfully talented pair of brothers, him and his brother, Robert Sherman. Give us a little bit of information for those who don't have any idea. I can't imagine there's many, but give us a little bit of information as to who Richard Sherman is, so that folks know.
So, as you said, Richard died at the ripe young age of 95. And on a non-Disney note, I think one of the things that talks to his character and how he looked at the world and it invited everybody in his music is that he passed away married to the love of his life, his wife, Elizabeth, for 66 years. I mean, that's such an unheard of number in today's society. 66 years, 3 children, 6 grandchildren, 3 great-grandchildren. He loved people and life and happiness. He, way back before he was the Richard Sherman of Disney, he spent 2 years in the Army Band and Glee Club. He currently has a star on the Walk of Fame. He's won 2 Oscars, 3 Grammys. He has 24 gold and platinum albums. He's received the very elusive George W. Bush Award of the National Medal of Arts, the Diane Disney Miller Lifetime Achievement Award. He's in the Songwriters Hall of Fame. And he even out in California in the Burbank Studios, they renamed Soundstage A to the Sherman Brothers Stage. That's how impactful they are for Disney. And they, of course, have a window right on Main Street in Disneyland. So the Sherman Brothers both have that long Disney history. As you said, Jeff, they are the originals back when Walt was alive. And if you've ever seen Saving Mr. Banks, you will definitely see them pictured in there.
Well, and I think the interesting piece to talk about when you talk about Richard and Robert Sherman and we tie them so closely to Walt is because they were close to Walt. You know, they held a role in the Disney company as the in-house songwriters. And like
they were cast.
Yes.
A role
yes.
that doesn't exist today. But yes, they were in-house songwriters. They were literally down the hall from Walt to be called in at all times. And people may know the more modern Sherman Brother influences, even the In the Park influences, but they started back in 1958 with the Mickey Mouse Club music.
Yeah, and iconic. I mean, literally, as we're going to go through these songs tonight, and you're going to hear us mention a number of them, you're going to get to the point where you're going to say, "Oh my gosh, that's them too." I mean, it's a to take a line from a New York Yankees history. It's a murderer's row lineup of songs that they have here that they didn't miss. And so you start way back in '58 with Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. I mentioned that they were the in-house songwriters. They were so close to Walt that essentially when something needed to be written, that's who he trusted. He went to these two guys because he knew that they were going to deliver on whatever needed to be done. And it's just a tremendous piece of Disney history.
And again, they were right there. And again, setting the scene to where we were, it wasn't that time of technology. They didn't fiddle on their keyboard and save the music. Again, going back to Saving Mr. Banks, you see them coming into Walt's office, kind of trying some things out, scribbling out those music notes. It was all done by hand without that level of recording. And they were creating right in the room with Walt and seeing what he thought and making changes on the fly to come up with something that they really loved.
With the piano in the room. Right. I mean, we're not talking, like you said, it's not a computer, not a keyboard, an actual piano in the room.
And that old, staff music paper that they were
Correct.
Scribbling down so they could remember what they did and go back to it, because even the recording techniques back then weren't, available to everybody.
No.
Same way, I don't know what they would do understanding how you record on your iPhone today. Everybody's got a recording device on them.
Yeah, totally.
And that just wasn't it. They couldn't even do that simplistic thing, just to have their own copy.
So let's break down some of the more famous works that we know of. You mentioned all the awards, right? So let's talk about, some of the famous works that they're affiliated with.
I think his real big initial hit was working on Mary Poppins. That's where he had the 2 Oscar nominees. And I bet most of you won't guess that the Oscar came for Chim Chim Cheree, not Supercalifragilistic, not Feed the Birds, not Spoonful of Sugar. So did I just name the most iconic Disney songs? Did you all of those big Disney hits are the Sherman Brothers?
Well, and that's, just everything you mentioned there from that particular movie. There's no way to imagine that film without every single thing that you just mentioned there.
Forget the film for a minute. How many people, just even if they haven't shown the film to their kids yet or something, like the Spoonful of Sugar, I think people just may not even realize that's from Mary Poppins if they're not big Disney fans. But that song, I remember when I was little and my mom would, try and give you medicine on a spoon. She's like, oh, it's a spoonful of sugar. And she'd hum along to the lyrics of that song.
Well, that's why that
second Oscar came for best score.
Do you know the history of Spoonful of Sugar, how it came to be?
I do not.
So they were writing songs for Mary Poppins, and they were given the polio vaccine, his kids. And his kids came home from school that day, and they told him they got the polio vaccine. He said, well, did it hurt? And they said, no, they just put it on a spoonful of sugar. And
wow.
Bang, that's how the song came to be.
Very cool fact.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. But you were mentioning the score, so I'm sorry. I stepped on you there.
No, but again, you think of, I will say that if you say to me, name a Mary Poppins song, I think Spoonful of Sugar and Supercalifragilistic
sure,
are really the top ones that come to mind for me. Probably followed by Feed the Birds and Chim Chim Cheree after that. So, when I look over his life and I'm like, wow, you do wonder, how was that the Oscar one? But I guess they could only have so many winning songs, and that's why they gave them that whole best score category, because it was hard to pick just one.
Yes, just one hit after the other. And Feed the Birds, notoriously for maybe it's not notorious, maybe it's just my psychosis, but Feed the Birds was the song for Walt that they would sit in the office when Walt needed to contemplate something. He would just look at them and say, play it. And they knew exactly what he meant. And he would sit there and they would play, he would play Feed the Birds for him. So if you haven't listened to that score in a long time, which you may not have, Go back and you'll hear these things in a very, very different way now that you know that it was tied to not only Richard Sherman and his brother Robert, but their connection to Walt Disney as the man. It
And
was a really unique experience and really unique relationship.
actually, when we did our tour of the Walt Disney Studio, they talked about Feed the Birds literally coming from the birds outside of Walt's office.
Yeah, I believe it.
So,
I believe it.
you think about these people, and again, we're going to talk more about their other songs, but maybe in a way they're so iconic because they're the simplistic things that we can all relate to.
Definitely, definitely. And listen, everybody has a different tie to it, right? Feed the Birds is a personal thing to me. So I tear up every time I hear it. But I do know that when you look at the history of the Walt Disney Company and Walt Disney as an entertainer, we have certain roots in the World's Fair, which the Sherman Brothers were a part of as well.
And I think most people who, again, are Disney fans know that that's really where Walt pitched his ideas. And so they are the creators of It's a Small World. And don't hate me that you're all singing it forever. Think of Richard. What a great tribute.
Yeah.
But also the second song, which my family knows is the notorious attraction to break down in Walt Disney World. It's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow.
Yeah, shining at the end of every day. I mean, that honestly, those two songs, because I associate them with going around in a circle, one in a circular theater and one just on a very long, happiest boat ride around the world. Those two scores, you mentioned the scores for the movie Mary Poppins before, but those two are scores of things that went from the World's Fair and then found their way into our theme park experience.
And that's, again, think about theme park songs that we'll give you a couple more in a minute, but those are really the iconic ones that people leave the park humming. I will say not necessarily Sherman Brothers related, but when we sing It's a Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow, generally in my family, we also wonder what they've given to the dog Rover that this dog has lived for 70 years.
He's very, very well fed. It must be all the water that was in the drip pan from the early days of the refrigerator that he was drinking.
That's got to do it.
But we're talking theme parks, so let's segue from the World's Fair because, like you said, that's where some of these ideas were born, and then they transformed themselves into Disneyland, and then obviously after Walt's passing, found their way in Disney World and parks all over the world.
Interesting fact for you, It's a Small World is playing in a Disney theme park at every moment of the day, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, because that attraction can be found in every park. So not only is it the continuous earworm for all of our listeners, but it literally never stops playing. It can be heard around the world.
For 24 hours, there's a little piece of Richard Sherman playing all day long.
All day long. The same song every day.
It's a world of laughter and a world of tears, depending upon your perspective, I suppose. But let's talk about the theme parks, because I know that there are...
One of our other favorite earworms is Walt Disney World and Disneyland. It's the Tiki Room.
Yeah.
That, again, is the Sherman Brothers. And you're probably, as, again, I'm saying them, maybe humming them, you're hearing them in the song in your head because they're all that great upbeat music that just wants you tapping your toes along and enjoying it. Moving over to Epcot, they're responsible for Figment's One Little Spark. Who doesn't love that song?
It's honestly, if I have to think of a single song that reminds me of being a kid in Walt Disney World, it is that song. It is the original Journey into Imagination with the Dream Finder and One Little Spark. I pop that on. Oh, I'd have to say once a week just to listen to it to take my mind somewhere. So it's a big part of sparking memories for me. Pun absolutely intended.
You bet. And one of his other really popular songs is the Kiss Goodnight, played at Disneyland. That's that musical score after the fireworks when the park is getting quiet. It's time to go. That, again, is a tribute to the Sherman Brothers.
And I think when we talk about visiting the theme parks and hearing this music, sometimes when you walk around a theme park and you just hear the score that's playing behind you, you kind of lose sight of the fact that it's It's moving your emotions without even really being cognizant of it. And to me, that's what some of what these songs do, is that it enhances the visual nature of where you're at. In some instances, it enhances all the senses that are firing while you're visiting these. But it's one of those things that no matter where you are, if you can pop on a recording of one of them, you can almost picture yourself back in something like the Tiki Room, in something like Journey into Imagination, watching that Disneyland Kiss Goodnight. Like these are things that transcend the experiences where they are intended to be played. And when you play them elsewhere, your brain goes to where they were. Does that make sense?
And again, your brain goes to a happy place, an upbeat place. You know, they're not the ones that wrote the score on Haunted Mansion.
No.
That's not the music that, you know, that dreary isn't what they're known for. It would be hard to hear any of these and not smile and even think, well, we all tease that they are earworms and, you know, your punishment is being locked in Small World forever.
Right.
Think about the last time you wrote it. You probably left there humming that song for a little bit and having the joy with it.
Yes. And it's one of those things that the kids keep wanting to go to. And I can't help but think that is definitely why. My kids have, one of the first songs my kids learned how to sing was the Tiki, 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 Tiki Room. And they had never even been by the time that they were singing it. So you definitely can't discount the earworm nature of what it is and just the overall fun environment that it creates when you hear it.
And I think the legacy of the Sherman Brothers, obviously we're talking about it today in 2024, but it is so in depth and they are admired by so many that in 2009, there was actually a documentary produced called The Boys. And whatever streaming service you have, it seems they all do have it playing. I highly encourage you, take an hour and 41 minutes out of your life. Not only will you hear about them and much more than what we're talking about, but they bring in, again, it was done in 2009, so some of these people also aren't with us anymore.
Right.
But Roy Disney talks about the Sherman Brothers and what he liked about them. Julie Andrews and Angela Lansbury, what it was like working with him and the creative genius behind it. John Lasseter, that's a very small number of people that are covered in the film, but it's not all, you know, that heavy documentary. I'm not a big documentary person. I will readily admit that. They tend to drone on a lot to me, but with all these different celebrities speaking and talking about them, it's some great anecdotal stories, and it really gives you another good look behind the curtain.
Well, we are coming to the end of our program. So is there anything else that you wanted to mention before we say goodnight?
I think, again, wrapping up, what is his character and how did he want us all to feel those happy feelings and humming? When news of his death was released, the family announced that they will be planning a celebration of his life. And I'm not going to say that nobody else does that. But again, they want to celebrate him. They want to leave everybody with that great, happy feeling. And one of the quotes that I was reading in a variety of stars commenting on his death actually came from Ben Stiller. And he was talking about his love of Disney and seeing Disney movies. But what he said is, I remember the song in the movies better than the movies themselves. Mm. And I think that's true. Again, we all may know kind of an outline of Mary Poppins, but I bet many of you could sing Supercalifragilistic to me or Spoonful of Sugar, where you might not be able to fill in all of the plot points. So It's really how much legacy, not only is his music loved, but how big that Disney impact was.
Well, and I encourage all of you that are listening to this too, to just do a Google search of Richard Sherman and see what some of the people that you know as really, really influential people like Ben Stiller in the entertainment world have had to say since his passing, because you're going to find that there are a number of people that have been connected to this Disney universe that have drawn such inspiration from having met him, from having worked with him, from having grown up listening to him. And I think that in that regard, we're all incredibly fortunate to have been on the planet at the same time as this incredibly talented and wonderful man.
We really are. And I'll share two of my other favorite quotes. I'll make you stall for an extra minute for me.
Yeah, go
But
ahead.
obviously, I don't know that there's anybody who's a Disney fan who doesn't know who Josh Gad is, our love of Olaf.
Sure.
And again, we're talking about famous people who work with famous people who run in those circles. And Josh says, one of the greatest privileges of my life was getting to know the legendary Richard Sherman, the man responsible for so many songs that defined my childhood, from Mary Poppins to Jungle Book and legendary rides like Small World, Tiki Room, and beyond. What a giant and what a beautiful soul.
Yeah.
What a great tribute. And the other one that really struck me was Alan Menken, because now you're talking, again, musician to musician. Richard Sherman was such a class act, a sweet man, and a beautiful songwriter. We are all so blessed to have him in our lives. And Alan Menken, I think, kind of carried that later torch. If you don't recognize that name, he worked on the score for Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin. So you can really see how that connection and probably the great influence that he had. Just an all-around inspirational person and a man who leaves a phenomenal legacy.
Folks like you and I who are, unapologetically crazy Disney people, because let's just call a spade a spade.
We'll go for that.
That's who we are, right? If you were to bring a couple of names to the table as, aside from Walt Disney, who do you think has the most importance in your experience with the Disney product? There's no doubt in my mind that you and I are getting to this name within the top 4 or 5.
I was going to say, I kind of struggle on 1, 2, and 3 in my mind. So, but definitely he falls in 1, 2, or 3.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm like I said, I don't think it's hyperbole to say that we are very fortunate to have been here on this planet in the time when he, and to some degree, he and his brother were working to create the magic that they have. We say, keep making memories at the end of our show, and there's no doubt about it. Richard Sherman has helped create a ton of memories for me. I'm assuming for you as well.
Most certainly.
Thanks for doing this week. I know it's a little bit of a departure from our normal. I hope you all enjoyed it. Sandy, have a great week.
You as well.
That is a wrap on this amazing legacy that won't be forgotten. Next time you're in the parks and you hear their songs, you'll know it's the Sherman Brothers making you smile. Make it a great week. Keep making memories.
Are simple and free. Listen, listen, she's calling to you. Feel the birds talking.